In topic number 2, we want to discuss scatter diagrams. Sorry, I originally have the wrong thing there, so make sure you fix it. I'll fix it for future semesters. So scatter diagrams are a graph that shows the relationship between two quantitative variables measured on the same individual. The explanatory variable is graphed on the horizontal axis, aka the x-axis. And the response variable is graphed on the vertical axis, aka the y-axis. So when you think about from algebra class, right, the horizontal is the x-axis, the vertical is the y-axis. And a scatter diagram graphs dots that stand for individuals. So one individual has this much x and this much y, another individual has this much x and this much y, and so on. And of course, they can be in any quadrant, etc. Now we are going to have scatter diagrams that have some meaning beyond just the letters x and y, because of course we're going to have explanatory and response variables, and so they're going to have a further value. So explanatory variable is your x, and response variable is your y. I'll put that in green. Now the following scatter plot shows the relationship between the number of births per woman in a country and that country's average life expectancy in 1962. And the table just shows a few of the countries. Obviously, there are a whole bunch of countries. As a matter of fact, by last count, there were 201 countries in 1962. And so you can just see, you're just seeing a few of them. They were in alphabetical order, and I got these from gapminder.org, which is an amazing website for data. All right, so you can see here the explanatory variable is on your x-axis. So it's right here. That's the fertility rate, which is the number of births per woman. And if you like, you can kind of highlight it up here. This is your explanatory variable. This is your x. Your response variable is the life expectancy, which is the y. And you can see it because over here, it's on the y-axis. All right, now we're going to use this graph to answer a whole bunch of questions in the next page. So the first of which is, what do each of these dots represent? So before I even go to that page, each of these dots is a country, right, in 1962. So there's a country and a country and a country, and each of these dots represents that fertility rate and that life expectancy for that country, but the dots themselves are countries. So each dot is a country. Right? The explanatory variable was the fertility rate, which we had in orange, right? It was your x. And then the response variable is your life expectancy, which was y. All right, now fertility rate. What type of variable is that? So let's go back and look at the fertility rate for a second. So you can see fertility rate is right here. So it's a measured rate for your country, right? So that means it's a continuous variable. It's quantitative, it's continuous because it's measured, right? You're measuring it for the country. All right, now what about the US? I thought it would be interesting to kind of see what the US's values were. So the US is right here in the middle. The US had the numbers 3.48 and 70.3. So what does that mean? Well, in 1962 in America, we would expect a woman to have about 3.48 births, right, in her lifetime. So let me write that down. In 1962, in the US, women had about, well, I guess I should say women were expected to have. And I don't mean that as in like a societal expectation, although that might be the case. I mean a mathematical expectation. It's the average. So women were expected, I was about to write expectation, were expected to have about 3.48 births. I thought I'd write down the points so you can see it. It's 3.48 births in their lifetime, right? This is not like in that year or something like that. In their lifetime. I'll just say it right there. Right, that's what the 3.48 means. All right, also in 1962 in the US, right, so a baby born in 1962 in the US was expected to live about 70.21 years, which is a measurement, of course, of the healthcare and health level of your country. Now, in 1962, the African country of Rwanda had a birth rate of 8.2 births per woman and a life expectancy of 45 years. So we're going to circle and label Rwanda on the graph. So this is just a check of whether you know how to read a graph like that. So they had a fertility rate of 8.2 births per woman. Yeah, 8.2. And then a life expectancy of 42 years, I think it was. So that is right there. That's Rwanda. And again, Rwanda's point would be 8.2. Oh, it was 45. Sorry, 45. Right there. So that's just checking whether you know how to read these graphs, right? Whether you know what you're looking at when you look at these points. All right, so that's done. Next, what relationship do we see? Well, I'm not even going to go to the next page for a second so we can look at this. The relationship we see is negative because as fertility rate increases, as we move to the right on the graph, then the life expectancy is going down. So that's a negative relationship. So let's write that out. So we see a negative relationship. That's the mathematical term for that. So it looks like this. X here, Y here, and your dots are going this way, right? As X increases, which means you're moving to the right on the graph, right? Right? So as you go up for your X, so you're moving to the right, as you do that, your Y decreases, right? It's moving down, or the points are moving down, I should say, right? So as you move to the right on the graph, the points are going down. That's what a negative relationship looks like, right? So as X moves up, which means you're going to the right, so as I move to the right on the graph, the points are going down. It's declining. Now, I chose 1962 for a very particular reason. 1962 was the year that the terms First World and Third World were coined by, well, they were coined earlier, but they were said in a big speech by the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations. And so it kind of took off as a term. So what do we see happening? Where are the two worlds that we see on the graph? All right, so the first world, just choosing a color here. All right, so the first world, well, let's go back to the graph and see if you can see it. The first world is over here. See it? It's up in the top left. Now, what do these countries all have in common? They have a low fertility rate and they have a high life expectancy, right? So, low fertility, high life expectancy. In other words, they have small families. They're over here, right? So if you think of our dots, you know, now granted we have a big clump over here, but that's the direction it's going. The first world's over here, right? So it has small families and long lives, right? In other words, small families and long lives. That's that corner. The third world is over here. Now, if you're wondering where the second world is, well, the second world, this was the height of the Cold War. So the second world was considered to be the Soviet Union and its ancillary countries. So the Soviet bloc was the second world, at least as far as the US was concerned. All right, so that would be, well, let's see, high fertility, and low life expectancy. In other words, they're having large families and short lives. Now, because it's interesting, let's look and see what Gapminder has to say about this. So this is the graph in Gapminder. In case you're interested, there's the US at 3.48 and 70.3. Over here is Rwanda, like we said, at 8.2 and 45. And you can see there's different colors for the different regions of the world. So there's the yellow and then the blue for sub-Saharan Africa, and then the red for Asia and so on. That's what's blinking. And we can make this play through time and have it show us how the world has changed and changing over time. Interesting, isn't it? So watching all the countries kind of bounce around. I'll speed it up just a little bit. And now many of you have been born, right, by this point. And look at how it narrows and kind of comes together. So all those countries that used to be way over here are now not way over there. We're all together in the top left corner. So the world is no longer what it was in 1962. Amazing, isn't it? This is actually called a bubble graph. It's a scatter plot that has bubble sizes. So for example, the largest bubbles out there are India and China, because China and India have the largest population. So you can see over here in the corner, it says the size is the population, which I don't want to change. So that's a pretty common one. So the bigger the bubble, the larger the population of the country. And you can see all the different countries, and you can see how they've changed over time. You can see also with the added addition of colors that we're able to see even more than that. So this is showing time, colors. It's instead of just showing X and Y, which is babies per woman and life expectancy, it's also showing us population size, which is another variable, and then it's showing us continent, which is another variable, and it's showing us time, because when we press play, we're able to see it going through time, which is an amazing type of scatter plot. So we can see that the relationship has changed significantly from 1962. There's still a negative relationship. So let me just say the countries have changed since 1962. Many of the former third world countries, quote unquote, are no longer in that region. There's one zone that still has some problems. I don't know if you've noticed it. If I go back to the graph, you can see it. It's the blue zone right here. It's sub-Saharan Africa. Now, it's still doing way better than it was, but obviously there are still a few issues there in terms of babies per woman and life expectancy. But the life expectancy is way higher than it was in 1962. There's no country that is at 45, for example. Right? And that's Niger, by the way, in case you're interested, way over there. But it's at 7.07 instead of 8.2 for Rwanda back in the day. Have changed since 1962. Many, if not most, of the former third world countries, 7.07 instead of 8.2 for Rwanda back in the day, have changed since 1962. Many, if not most, of the former third world countries, 7.07 instead of 8.2 for Rwanda back in the day, have changed since 1962. Many, if not most, of the former third world countries, 7.07 instead of 8.2 for Rwanda back in the day, have changed since 1962. Of the former are in the top left corner now. This particular example was actually shown to the U.S. State Department, which is diplomats, if you will. So the United States diplomats, because there was a feeling that a lot of them treated the world as if it still was 1962, which of course it's not anymore. And so this was a very eye-opening experience for them.